Welcome to today's Conversation Series program, Women in Leadership. Margo Hoyt, Managing Director, Talent and Leadership Development at LHH, will be speaking with Kim Toews, EVP and Head of Human Resources at HSBC Bank Canada. Today, Margo and Kim are talking about what it means to be a woman in the workplace, both today and as we look to the future. We will be taking questions at the end of the conversation. Please use the Q&A function to enter your questions anytime during the session, and we'll respond to as many questions as possible. Hosting today's program is Margo Hoyt. Over to you, Margo.
Thank you very much, Laura. We're so excited to be here and engaged in this conversation with Kim. For those of you who are new to LHH, we partner with our clients to see the possibilities in their people. So whether as you're going through transformation and emerging from COVID, we can see the light in the tunnel. You may have requirements for recruitment and executive search. We also partner with our clients around assessment, succession, and development of their leaders in a variety of different ways. And of course, career development strategies, and if necessary, career transition strategies. Today, though, I am really pleased to be presenting the third in our conversation series. Our guest is Kim Toews. For those of you who do not know Kim personally, you're going to be delighted to get to know a bit about her personal story and the great work that she and they are doing at HSBC Bank in Canada. She is the EVP and Head of Human Resources there. Based in Vancouver now, she's been with the bank for more than 30 years. Rising from a role as a receptionist through about 10 or more different types of promotions. She's held regional, national, and global roles and has successfully satiated her need for new challenges by changing portfolios every few years. We were just talking before we went live about her stints in both London, England, and Malaysia. Through her career, she's held accountability for branch operations, customer service, diversity, resourcing, learning, talent management, and HR business partnerships, the full gambit. And currently, as a member of the Canadian HSBC executive team, she helps shape bank strategy, ensuring a people-centric approach and an environment where each employee can thrive in a diverse and inclusive culture. So important to our conversation today. Kim's passionate about bringing tangible value every day. And congratulations, Kim, on being named the 2020 HRD, that's the Human Resources Director, Global 100 Top People Practitioners. Absolutely a fine honor. She's a chartered human resource professional and volunteers in numerous capacities to help propel the HR profession and to keep people first in leadership decisions. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We started this conversation series in the spirit of International Women's Day, which has quickly become International Women's Month, and we'll take it on for a season or more. And we really wanted to celebrate the achievements of women like yourself who've done so much in your own careers, but are also sharing your wisdom and your insights, a little inspiration for both organizations and individual women to accelerate in their own careers. So you and I will have this conversation, as Laura said up front, for probably about the first 25 or 30 minutes. And then we will open it up to questions from the viewers. So again, a reminder to please, viewers, as you go through this conversation with us and have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our very best to get through as many of those as possible. So I shared in the introduction, Kim, a little bit about the success that you've achieved to date. Tell us your story, though. I want to hear in your words some of the important career milestones or turning points in your career that have helped you achieve the role you have today.
Sure, yeah, no problem. And I should first say thanks for the invitation. I am looking forward to the conversation, and I hope that people do find it interesting and something of value throughout it. You know, when you ask this question, I think the first thing that comes to my mind, I feel like I have to start with my parents. And I know that maybe that's not exactly, you know, what you're asking about. It's more about my career, but actually I think how they raised me really did make a difference. And I feel incredibly blessed to have such amazing people in my life, because they fostered self-confidence in me at every step of growing up. And I don't think I really appreciated just what a gift that was until later in life. You know, I never questioned what I could do or what I couldn't do. It just, just everything was an option. And they always say that, right? To your kids, you should make them feel like, well, my parents really did deliver on that. And I'm so grateful for that, because I find now when I'm talking to people or throughout my career, so many people put limitations on themselves all the time. It's not, and don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't do that. I just, I just feel like I started from a very good place. But it's something that I try to tell people to stop doing, because honestly, there are more than enough people out there that will try to limit you already. You don't need to add to that by limiting yourself. So I think my story has to start there, because it's really a fabulous foundation. So like you said, I started at the bank as a receptionist. And one of the milestones that I feel is just exactly right there, because I had an offer at that time for a lighting store that paid more money. And I often wonder, where would I be right now if I had prioritized money instead of opportunity? And I think that there's like a little, I didn't totally know it at the time, but there definitely was a learning there, about money doesn't actually give you everything that you're looking for. And I'm a great example of that, given I've been with the bank for so long and it's provided so many opportunities. But I do think the biggest milestone, if I had to reflect back, would be that decision to explore other opportunities outside of Canada. Working for HSBC in this big, fabulous global company, my husband and I really thought, why aren't we taking advantage of that? We should explore that. And so that's what we did. And the decision ultimately really opened up the world for me. And I don't just mean geography, actually. I mean so many more things than that. So, my network expanded hugely. The initiatives I was responsible for had global impact and reach. Culturally, I was exposed to so many more situations that grew myself personally as well as professionally from a cultural perspective. And of course, my family. We were talking just before we came on about my family. I would call my two sons global citizens, because they really, through the 6 years that we were overseas, created that or grew up with that global mindset, which is just incalculable in terms of the value. And from a career perspective, I've been back in Canada for 7 years now, but I still draw on those experiences and those connections to this day. It's incredible. So I would say there's many more different little milestones or points, but I think those are probably the ones to call out right now.
It's interesting how many women I've spoken to over the years who do go back to some kind of a parent or a role model that they say believed in them from a young age or from a young point in their career, like they may not have otherwise believed in themselves. So a mother, a grandparent, an early boss, but somebody who's really taken that interest. And what that means to me at my age now, in my 50 pluses, is the importance of being there for other women and for being that kind of mentor and that kind of support. Again, whether it's for family members or junior colleagues in our organizations. And I think that that's really something for us to reflect on as we go about, and how early in your career you had career development strategies, whether you knew they were not or not, thinking ahead beyond the money of that first job into what it might mean for a fuller or the next step down the journey for you. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because when people ask me about career often, it's like, well, how did you get where you are? I'm sure you had a plan. I'm sorry, I had no plan. I really had no plan. And I don't know how many people watching have a plan. And I would say kudos to you. I just knew, I made that choice because I thought the work would be more interesting. And I thought there would be some other jobs and I wouldn't have to look again for a job after this one, because I did get bored easy. But yeah, I know it makes me sound like I have a plan, which is awesome.
As a female leader, who's been in the workplace now over 30 years at HSBC, we've said. What were some of the early hurdles that you have maybe had to overcome? And how is it different for you today? You know, what kind of progress have we made, and where do we still need to focus?
So if you think about what I just said about, so, you know, I started with a bank very early. I got bored every 18 months or so changed a job. So what that meant was, not only did I have hurdles to deal with as a woman, but I was also young. So I was almost always the youngest person at the table and the only woman as well. And so, you know, there were absolutely times when people, because of those two factors, either didn't take me seriously or thought that they could talk over me or around me. And that's why I called out that self-confidence piece, because I basically called people out immediately. Well, I shouldn't say immediately, in the most respectful way that I could. And sometimes that meant in a meeting on the spot in the moment. And sometimes it meant outside of the meeting separately, because knowing that person and how they would react, you know, there's a time and a place for it. But if they didn't listen, or if it wasn't, you know, if it wasn't dealt with, then I would revert to it being more in the meeting and in the time. But, you know, you have to set boundaries for yourself, and people will treat you the way you allow them to treat you often. So, you know, so for example, I'll give you an example of calling someone out. So this one happened to be in a one-on-one, and this was a very senior person, and I was their support role, let's just say. And this person was known for over talking people. So it was, you know, we would be having a conversation. I would be understanding what his needs were, and, you know, consulting with him and collaborating on what the solution would be. And he would just completely overtalk me constantly. So I finally allowed it to happen a few times. And then I won't say his name, obviously, but I was, so-and-so, can you please let me finish? Well, yes, but I just want to, no. I do have something to say, and I really do think you need to, you know, you need to hear this. Oh, okay. And then after I said, you know, you are very passionate and very, you know, knowledgeable and added. So complimenting them, because all of that was true. But I equally am passionate and have a lot to say, and am, you know, we're here talking because it's between the two of us that we need to figure this out. And so we ended up, no one had ever called him out on it before, quite frankly. And so we ended up having a bit of a laugh and a code word that I would use the word, so-and-so, you're very passionate. And then he would be like, oh, right, okay. So I need to pull that back a little bit. But I think for me, you know, honestly, I used emotions selectively. I relied on logic and reason and data wherever I could. So sometimes people are talking very loudly or trying to just ignore you. I would, you know, try very, very hard to establish my credibility, and the reason why I was in that discussion or in that meeting or whatever the situation was, and just made sure that I spoke up. So didn't allow people to ignore me or not count me in on the conversation. And I have to say, there is one thing, and I maybe this is more than you're looking for, but I very much relied on tone and cadence as well. So early in my career, someone gave me a tip, because I was so young and I was in a supervisory role and dealing with customers who were not, let's say, like, so when they were upset or angry or something not good was happening, I was the escalation. And I was this young woman standing in front of, you know, at times a much, much older, much more experienced, you know, customer. And often there was an aggressiveness or a loud, and the advice that I got was, the quieter you are, the more they have to actually quiet down and lean in to hear you and to listen. And it does two things. It slows the conversation down and it brings it into a much more calm situation, a calm level. And I have to say, I use that so often to my advantage. And so, yeah, just a couple of examples, right?
I love the, it's a customer service tip that's helpful in so many different applications. And it sounds like you had some really natural instinct about demonstrating that you weren't going to be pushed around, and also had some coaching. How much of it was natural for you, and how much did you actually get some development coaching or support from people around you?
Well, it's probably hard to say, but I think the coaching piece is a very big part of it, because I was fortunate to have some, great examples and mentors around me at the time. And I can tell you that did not happen the first time it happened to me. So because if I go back to that self-confidence piece too, I felt like I wanted to, but I had a bit of not an imposter syndrome, but a feeling of, do I do that? Is that actually acceptable? And so I very much went and consulted with some people who I knew, had been in those situations before, and just, tried to kind of glean an approach. So I feel like I had the instinct, but I think as women, we sometimes don't listen to our instinct. As long as you're respectful, and as long as you are not just talking for talking's sake, but that you have something to say, you need to respect those instincts, because 9 times out of 10, they're accurate. And if you make a mistake, that's okay too. Everyone does, but I think you also asked about what is it like today. I am constantly in the back of my mind thinking about making sure that I'm credible. You meet new people all the time. You have to continually build those relationships and establish those boundaries all the way throughout your career. How you do it might be a little bit different, but those key principles of having high expectations and making sure that you're adding value, never change.
Very interesting. The theme, I will say, even just over these last 3 conversations, there are lots of things around self-confidence, but you got to do the work, right? There will be nothing handed to you because a diversity quotient is trying to be, or quota is trying to be met. You still got to do the work. You still got to show up, right? Yeah, excellent. HSBC Canada has a female president and CEO. You've also achieved gender balance at the executive committee and at the board. This is a very elite club that you're in. How has this impacted the culture and your ability to attract and retain women, for instance?
Yeah, we've had that since 2013, a gender balanced board and executive team. And I kind of feel like the benefits are hard to quantify, because we've been at it for a while now, and we've had the benefit of that and been able to operate. So it's just so organic now is almost what I want to say. And so sometimes you have to stop and reflect back about those benefits. I think I was reminded of it with someone. It was an individual. We have a reverse mentoring, or a program where we just try to get together with people in all levels of the organization and just connect and stay true to all people from all areas of the bank at all levels. Anyway, and it was during one of those conversations, and this woman was saying to me, I was hired. She said she was hired about a year or 2 ago, and as it so happens, her role, there was some little mini crisis that was happening, and our CEO and our head of commercial banking, 2 of the most senior roles in the bank, had to be in this meeting. Now, this individual was, obviously in the middle level of management, but she needed to be at the meeting because of the nature of her portfolio. Anyway, she said to me, I'm sitting in this meeting 2 weeks after having started, having come from another bank, and I'm sitting there, and I just had to shake my head, because she said it wasn't so much what they were saying, but the 2 most senior people in the meeting were women. And she said it wasn't so much what she was saying as the fact that was a fact. And she said it had a real impact on her in terms of just, doesn't have to be, you can have equality, you can have, diverse opinions, you can hold the most senior roles in the organization. And I thought it was interesting because she wasn't saying, she wasn't saying about, just how great they were and what they were saying in them as individuals. It was the sheer fact that they were women in the two most senior roles. So that was a good reminder to me about the value of it. It's commented on a lot by people who apply for the bank or who join us, because it is putting our money where our mouth is and really being able to, to make that happen. And I will say, it doesn't happen organically. You have to have constant attention to it, but it has driven some of the decisions we made as well, because you have that balanced decision makers, the kinds of things that we talk about are initiatives that are valuable to all. There's an unconscious element to it that comes into play. So for example, and by the way, it's not just benefiting women, it's benefiting men too. One of the things that we decided was to double our top-up pay for maternity and paternity leave. So that's not just a female thing, that's an overarching thing. But I'm not sure that it would have come up as a key issue if we didn't have that diversity and that equality in terms of representation. So yeah, the benefits come through in different ways.
Okay. It's interesting that you say, even though this has been a reality since 2013, I think you said, it's an ongoing focus and an ongoing priority. And I would say that, when I've talked to women about finding their careers and thinking about where they want to be, it's to look for organizations like yours who see the priority. And if you don't feel there's opportunity for advancement in your organization, that as women, perhaps we need to walk with our feet and find an organization that's more aligned with our own career aspirations and objectives. Is that a piece of advice that you may have given to others yourself?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the tone and the culture, anyone who's on the call, regardless of your gender, you have to make sure that cultural fit is what's going to allow you to bring your whole self to work. That can be an overused phrase, but it really is true. It really is true. So if the culture doesn't allow you to do that, which is the only way you're going to be the most successful you can be, then you do need to change that. And I would even say, we have pockets where it's not going to be as great as other areas. And I want to know about that. And that's the one thing we really encourage, as a company, is that speak up culture. So because a manager does set the tone. And if you have people who have some growth to do, who aren't being as supportive as they need to be, who aren't listening, we need to intervene. So to your point, if it really is not working for you, then do everything you can do to make it right. And if you can't, then you need to go somewhere where you can.
Excellent. As the owner of the human capital strategy for Canada at the bank now, what are the one or two additional strategies? We've talked about the importance of culture that you feel have really had the greatest impact on gender equity and advancing women.
So if we're talking specifically about gender equity, I have to say targets, honestly. That old adage of what gets measured gets done is true. I really think that if we hadn't set targets and put them on leaders' scorecards, and not just as a placeholder and a ability to make a check mark about, yeah, we've got targets. No, we held people accountable to those, and it impacted ratings and bonus if they didn't meet that. Now, obviously, HR has a role to play in that, because we need to make sure that we're providing, balanced slates of candidates, that we're doing everything on the back end. So it's not just the target, but what the target does is it pushes the organization to put everything else in place to support the target, as long as you're holding people accountable to the target, because they then put the pressure on all the different parts to be able to make sure that those targets are met then. But we have to be vigilant about them and really specific. So last year we introduced promotion targets. So not just hiring, because of course your representation is a function of multiple things: how many people leave, how many people start, but also how many people are promoted, because we want that at all levels. And I would say even as much as I say that we have a gender balanced board and exco, we are still working to get that equality of balance in all levels of the organization. So promotions into what we would call our director level was an area that we really wanted to focus on. So we set those targets, we made them very specific. We talk about them at every quarterly people committee. We report back on them. It's a big piece. It's a huge piece. But I think the other thing though, so that's one. But the other thing would be around training. And I'm not just talking about training for women or training for the organization. You have to do it. You have to get it on both sides. So we've done unconscious bias training for the entire organization multiple times, and not just like an e-module course. I mean, we have those as well, but I'm talking about bringing in an expert, going through all the leadership and the next layer down, and doing it every 2 to 3 years to make sure that people are reminded of this. In fact, we just actually launched an unconscious, a inclusion hiring manager training, that every hiring manager, if you post a role or if you open a requisition, it won't go forward until you've completed that training. And you have to do that training now. We just launched it, but the idea is that it will be needed to be completed once every 3 years. So you will be certified as an inclusive hiring manager, and then you'll be able to go ahead and do that training, or sorry, do that hire for that role. So it's got to be specific and tactical at the key moments that matter. Is important as well.
And what's interesting here is that there are so many groups, so many communities that are underrepresented, that we're working as organizations to make that shift. So whether it's Black and Indigenous, other people of color, the LGBTQ plus communities, gender, these strategies can be useful for all of those communities to really create that broader, diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the idea. And I think that's the challenge, because today we're talking International Women's Day, International Women's Month, but we have not cracked this for so many different strands of diversity. And I feel like we've almost been at it for longer from a gender perspective, and it takes time. So all of these things, one of the things that we definitely try to do at HSBC is be as specific as possible, but as broad as you can be, so it has the most benefit to the most groups, right? And that's very challenging, because you need to address the specific things that people are challenged with and dealing with, but you also have limited resources and effort, or budget, quite frankly, both people and money, to try to figure out what you need to focus on. It is a challenge. There's no question.
The real practical realities. And I know that when we've talked about this before, you mentioned the importance of the different human resource groups or employee groups, and just the importance of listening to those groups to really understand, how do you allocate those precious resources of time and money that we have, right?
Yeah, I mean, listening, it sounds so simple, right? But if you're trying to prioritize and just figure out what you need to do. Look, I also feel very lucky that I'm with a company that is a decent size and has prioritized diversity and inclusion. So we've done a lot of things over the years, but I'm sure there's lots of people on the call who are with companies who maybe are starting out or haven't spent a lot of time and effort in this space. So I feel like there's some thresholds that you really need to make sure you have, like accessibility for people with disabilities, or, even that unconscious bias training, I see as almost one of those baseline things. But once you get some of those baseline things in place, you really need to listen to your employees. What is it that they need and are struggling with, or that they would find practically and tangibly valuable. We look at our benefits, just as an example, at least every couple of years, but every single year we talk about, what are we missing? Is there anything emerging? What are we hearing from our employee engagement surveys, from our leadership forums, from visiting our branches. Like, what are we hearing that people are saying that they are needing or wanting that we may not be providing? And then looking at what is it that we are offering that maybe they don't find as valuable. So if you're operating with a limited budget or limited resources, you just want to continue to make sure that you're doing what is important to people. So, you know, we dialed down some benefits and then introduced or dialed up other ones because they have been something that our employees have told us they really need more of or want more of. And that's from a diversity lens as well as just general. But I think that same principle applies when you're trying to figure out what you want to do for the, you know, DEI agenda.
Great practical advice there that everybody will benefit from. You know, the final question before we go, and I can see some of the questions are being put in the Q&A. So this is your reminder, if you have questions, to start putting them in there. The pandemic has really shifted context for us. So I'm curious about what advice you're giving to other women today about their careers in our current COVID-19 context.
So what we're talking about during this COVID period, I am seeing, and through discussions with women, women are not applying as often for promotional roles as in the past. And, you know, I think the pause is because of increased responsibility or even just the feeling of that. So I've got a lot going on. You know, I'm adjusting to this. I've got care responsibilities that have maybe, you know, increased, or just it feels like more. And so when we dug into it a little bit, that's what kept coming back. And, you know, I think women, as a rule, give a lot and put themselves second often. And so that's something that I've been trying to talk to my sphere of influence. And when I'm talking and giving career advice, that's something that I'm trying to focus on quite a bit, which is, you know, to really examine if that is necessary for the individual or for the person that I'm talking to you. Is it really necessary? Or is it just a fear or a lack of confidence? Like, what is it? What is it? Because I think sometimes we'll use that as an excuse. Don't get me wrong. There are absolutely scenarios where that is the right decision to make. But I think, you know, really stopping to think about that, because, like, you know, I find that when people do push themselves, when they are bold, when they are, you know, getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable, which, you know, is something that you really need to do if you want to continue to progress and get ahead. If you're starting with yes in terms of not now or I can't, like, oftentimes we're surprised at just how supportive the people around us are, whether that's at work or at home, because we are, you know, what they will do when you're happy and you're really enjoying what you're doing, it has a spillover effect on everybody else, right? So even if it doesn't happen at first, where people are not being super supportive, it will. And as a rule, I feel like it does happen when you are satisfying yourself as well. You know, what is that thing about put your own mask on first and then you can help everyone else? You know, that kind of comes to mind as I was saying that. But I think that's probably the one thing that I would say from a COVID perspective is don't let this stop you. Be reasonable and measured, but also just really push yourself a little bit as to whether or not it is the right thing at this point.
And I think with your other hat, with your organizational leadership hat on, there's a concern right now about retention of all talent, but in particular for women, and sort of, you know, slipping backwards because of, you know, mid-career women, or the pipeline, if you will, of women who are the future of leadership for organizations stepping out. And there's always been a headwind that would say, you know, leaving and trying to come back is a difficult thing to do. But today we need to be flexible. We need, as organizational leaders, to really do whatever we can to retain talent, showing that our culture is inclusive and supportive, especially in today's circumstances.
Absolutely. And I think ask. Like if there's ever been a time to ask for flexibility, to ask for the time that you need, you know, so exactly to your point, Margo, not to step out, but to ask for what you need to allow yourself to be able to not feel guilty about whatever decision you decide to make, you know.
Yeah, excellent. All right, I'm going to turn my cast here on some of the questions that are coming in. Kim said, I had no plan for my career. I'd like to know if Kim had a maximum place of position, though, that she wanted to reach and why. Great question.
Oh, so, okay. So the short answer is no. The short answer is I fell into, even though I say that I felt like nothing was impossible and that I could do anything, I was classic in not setting my sights high enough. So, you know, when I was in the receptionist, oh my goodness, if I could be the manager customer service, that would be incredible. You know, when I was the manager customer service, wait a minute, like I can do this. What if I was this? Even this role as the head of HR, there are people, because I've been around the firm for a long time, there are people in the bank who say to me, you always said you didn't want that role. You didn't want the politics or the, you know, the everything that may come with it. But I think the more that I pushed myself and the more that I got a bit uncomfortable and took on roles that I wasn't super sure about, I shocked myself in terms of what I was okay with. And I don't have to do it the way other people do it, right? Mm-hmm. So this role, I am, for anyone who knows me, I am not a political animal in the least. And so I don't have to be amazing at this job and have to, you know, be a huge political maneuverer. I have to consider some of that. Of course, I'm not, you know, naive or silly, but at the same time, I can be my authentic self and do this job in the way I do it. And it works, you know. So the short answer is no, I didn't have a plan. I revised that plan throughout my career. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing, that if I had to look back, I would say it's okay to not have a plan, but just keep being open and keep, you know, trying things that you may not think you would be, you know, the best at, because you may surprise yourself.
Well, it's interesting. There was never part of that answer. Was there a lack of drive or ambition? Just an openness to whatever that next challenge might look like.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, this is coming from an anonymous attendee. How do you help foster that same confidence in women of color who often don't see others who look like themselves in leadership positions?
Yeah. So whenever I ask questions around like how to do, like, it has to be specific for the individual, right? So you, for anyone, regardless of who you are or what your challenges are, find someone, be amazing at what you do to be able to find the people that are your champions, right? Because what you want is you want someone that you're going to be able to bounce ideas off of, or what your challenges are. And at the beginning, it might be more of a, you know, acquaintance. But the more you talk to the person, the more that you're able to actually glean what their learnings are, the better you'll be able to bounce those really challenging things off of. So as you can tell, I'm an extrovert. So whenever people ask me about advice on this, I very much revert to talking things through and learning and understanding from others. That would be my default. And what I have found for me has helped me a whole lot. So whether, you know, if you are a woman of color, if there are not people that you see as role models in that exact same group that you belong to, that doesn't mean you can't learn from the others. It might just mean you need to add multiple people to be able to formulate what might work for you. I would say, though, it is very much about your organization and your culture. So even if I mentored someone and they were at a different company, everything that I experience and say may not be exactly what's going to work at your firm or in your situation. So try to find some people both within and outside of the organization to be able to learn from.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great, you know, that advice about having multiple mentors for different purposes and at different times in your career. I think that's terrific advice. Some will be very good about understanding your own culture. Others will be very good about some other aspect of your development or what you're trying to work on. And there are lots of people to admire from a variety of different places. I'll just throw this in from a research perspective, and I've mentioned this before, that women are known for networking at their own level and below. So just your encouragement to ask for mentorship from more senior levels is also terrific advice for women who are listening to really take to heart.
And don't be afraid to ask. So of course you're going to run into people who are like, oh, no, I don't have time. But I would say the vast majority of people are flattered to be asked. You have to measure your expectations though too, so don't ask and then book an hour-long meeting, right? So if you want to get into someone's calendar who you think is really busy, find a way to be able to say, to book a 15-minute meeting. I'd really just like some insight. So, the stuff I was mentioning earlier about these short connections meetings that we're doing, as a company, we're doing them for 20 minutes because there's no senior person that is going to say, no, I don't have 20 minutes to spend a bit of time talking to someone to make a new connection. Like that's low. That's easy to do, I would just say. So you can do that outside of a formal program and just ask for that 15 to 20 minutes to connect. And then you just need to use that time to make a good connection to then build off of that.
Terrific advice. Here's another one, more from an organizational perspective. So any recommendations to create targets for a firm of less than 70 employees with a long tenure and not in hiring mode? So a pretty stable workforce and a relatively small workforce.
So, well, targets are going to be difficult in that situation because if you don't have opportunity, it's hard to change numbers, right? So then you have to think of more long haul. I would say then your focus is going to be more around inclusivity. So having specific actions that your organization can do to continue to foster increased inclusivity and use the time to build that amazing culture of an inclusive working environment. So when you have those opportunities, you don't almost even have to have those targets so much because you have an environment that is going to naturally and organically actually just need that. It's a challenge though, because there is a tipping point in my experience of, so for sure from a gender perspective, once we had a balanced executive team, a broader consideration of talent just happens, right? Because not that you want people to only hire in their own image, obviously, but when you have more diversity, that unconscious piece of that seeping in, like it actually works to your benefit because you have more and people truly valuing that breadth of experience and perspective. So in the situation you just described, you have to almost force that a little bit because you don't have the opportunities to change those perspectives to give that a breadth of diversity. So I would suspect it's more around then actions and training and practicing inclusivity than it would be around the actual targets. Make your targets something else so that they can flow later.
Build the foundation, and then you'll have the opportunity to really leverage that strong foundation. Love that. This is a question from Emma, and I'm not going to say her last name necessarily correctly. Greenhalgh. Hi, Kim. I worked with you many years ago.
I know Emma. Yeah.
Okay. My question is about mentorship. What's the best way to seek out female mentors? It's hard to know who to trust. And how do you know?
How, Emma? Yeah. How do you know? So, look, the short answer I would say, in my experience, has been to try on lots of people. And that sounds weird a little bit because you don't want people to know you're trying them on, but they're trying you on too. Right. So the most fruitful and long-serving mentors or just great people in my life. I think if I named the people as mentors, if I were to talk to them, they would say, "Oh, you see me as a mentor?" Because it became a person who we shared stories and learned from each other, right? But if we're talking about senior people, it's a little bit harkening back to what I had just said about just ask and start and have conversations. I have a reverse mentoring relationship right now with someone in the organization. So she uses me in terms of, well, all the normal things about mentoring, obviously, but I also advocate for her in different situations that in my sphere of influence, and I use her to understand more about the actual employee experience in her role in her part of HSBC, and that happened because our initial meeting, we really formed a connection. And so to your point, Emma, we knew that this was, the time just flew. We initially booked that 20 minutes and that went by in a heartbeat. I have had that same experience with other people and it didn't work quite that way. So we didn't have that ongoing. So the short answer is reach out to as many people as you need to be able to kind of establish your, I think this word has been used before in other of your conversations, your tribe, right? Your team of people, your little cabinet that is actually going to help you, as well as you giving back and helping them.
Yeah, great advice. Is there a lesson, this is from Catalina Rodriguez, is there a lesson that Kim wished she had learned earlier in her career?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think it would be around effort, and I am very much a believer in working hard, and I don't think that's a lesson that you need to learn. I was definitely working hard throughout my whole life, but I think I gave too much, to be honest. I'm not sure I had the right balance of personal and professional. So what I would say is, you need to figure out how much to give while still being able to feel like you are a balanced person. So early in my career, and I had someone tell me this once. I was the last person there. I was quite junior. The branch manager came up to me. I think it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I can't remember exactly what I was doing, but I was that person, and he just looked at me and he said, Kim, if you, and it wasn't super early because I still probably had about, I think, 7 or 8 years with the bank up until that point. But he said to me, if you die tomorrow, we're not making a plaque for you on the floor here. We think you're awesome and great, and we think you're giving a lot, and that's all very appreciated, but you're giving too much. You are not, we think you're great. You don't need to give this level. We will replace you if you go. And we will miss you for sure. But he was basically saying to me, you are not balanced, you're not prioritizing yourself as much as you are the organization. And it's not going to pay off for you in the same parts as what you're giving. So figure out what you need to give and give that willingly, but don't give too much. Right. And, I think that is something that, well, like I say, I'm what, 20 years later, and I still remember that because it has bubbled up in the back of my head multiple times, like trying to check myself, so yeah.
So do the work, but there is this law of diminishing returns. At some point, giving more and more and more of yourself does not necessarily get you any higher in terms of people's respect or regard for who you are. Yeah, interesting. Exactly. There's some related questions here around balancing being a mother and having a career. I think you touched on a little bit of this before, but this question is, how do you think women can balance having a family and at the same time not put limits on their career growth? For example, I already have a ceiling set for myself because I'm afraid to not be able to balance family and career.
Oh, see, yes.
Heartbreaking, a little heartbreaking.
Oh, get it. But I get where it's coming from because, you know, like I just said, don't give too much. Make sure that you are doing what you need to do for your family. But I feel like it harkens back to what I had said earlier, where don't assume that you're not going to be able to manage both of those things. Set those boundaries in terms of what you need to do. So for example, now is a better time than ever about getting to those senior roles, but saying, I need to work from home 2 days a week, or I am not going to be in the office until 10 o'clock because I have these things. I can go to meetings in the morning, but there is a period of time where I need to drop my kids off, or I need to, whatever, fill in the blank for you. I really feel like at this point with COVID and all that, we can take the benefits of this. There are so many jobs that have proven that they can have increased flexibility. Not all jobs, I completely understand that as well. But the one thing, and I hope my husband is listening to this, one of the reasons why I have been able to do what I have done is because I had a good picker, and I picked a guy, a partner, who is super supportive and has, you know, allowed me to be bold and to do things that I may have put limitations like you just described on myself, because I would have felt guilty or bad about spending more time or different time, or just having more of my mind kind of, you know, taken up by work. And he, so that's an important piece too, to help you balance. Ask for that from your partner if you have one, or from whatever your support structure is. You know, it may not be a partner like that. It might be a friend group that is actually there for you.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, these are some great questions. Okay. So have you ever experienced failure? You may need a couch for some of these. Have you ever experienced failure or fear of failure during your career journey? And if so, how have you overcome them?
Yes, multiple times. You know what? The interesting thing is, if I hadn't have experienced failure, I actually would be sitting here right now thinking about I didn't push myself hard enough. Because if you're not failing, the thing that just came into my head was water skiing, which, you know, I'm competitive. I love sports in general. And I had someone say to me as I was learning to water ski and slalom ski, if you're not, because I had a fear of falling, right? Because that's painful. If you've ever water skied before and fallen, it's not fun. Anyway, and this person said, if you're not falling, then you're not pushing yourself, and you're not going to be improving and getting better and being more satisfied. And that very much is true for work as well. So yes, I have failed. I'll give you a very specific situation. In fact, I had contemplated using that as one of the milestone events when you had asked about milestones. When I first came back from Malaysia, from working overseas, we made the decision to come back because from a personal perspective. So the job that I was doing at the time was the global head of HR for all of IT, like 25,000 developers in HSBC, both onshore and offshore, like big, chunky, fabulous role. It was incredible, super satisfying, all of that good stuff. But my family was missing Canada. My kids were being a little bit un-Canadian, and we really, our goal was always, our end game was always to come back to Canada. So anyway, the long story is, we decided to come back, even though career-wise, it probably wasn't the most brilliant of decisions, because that kind of job doesn't exist in Canada, really. So anyway, so we did it. The head of HR job was open, actually, as it so happened, at the time of me coming back. And so, of course, I applied for it, and I did not get it. And I didn't get it, and I could get into all the details, but, you know, it was crushing for me, because it was like I had all these advocates from global reaching out saying, you know, you shouldn't even interview, you should just hire her. And it's, you know, there's a lot of elements to it, but I didn't get the job. And I had a real crisis, you know, identity kind of crisis thing of, what else can I do? Like, what are they looking for? Anyway, to make a long story short, it really, well, I keep saying that and I'm continuing this long story. So sorry about that. But I basically just thought, and it was a learning for me, being told no does not mean that you aren't good enough or that you aren't capable. You're just not what they want right now for that moment in time. And for whatever the organization needs, you're not what they need right now. So the learning for me was very much, whether that was naive or delusional, I don't care. You're just not what they need right now. That doesn't mean that you're not all that and that you couldn't and aren't capable of doing that job. So I chose to look at it in that way. I chose to look externally, and I've told that story to people in my team as well. And then I chose to stay and learn from the person who they hired to understand what it was that was, was potentially not there that they didn't see. And of course, as it turned out, I got the job eventually, which is great. But that was a really difficult period. And that's just frankly one example of needing to kind of rethink things a little bit.
Yeah. And those moments where we learn and we have to face that, it's not always going to roll. The dice aren't always going to roll in our favor. Sometimes we can control it, sometimes we can't, right? The timing, we can't control that. But learning, and I love the fact that you weren't going to just rest and say, well, I'll wait or I'll do something else here, because you'd already invested many years at the bank, but that you also looked externally to be double sure, right? That from a personal perspective, that you took that opportunity to make sure that you were really looking at all of your options.
Well,
right?
And I would say too, even though I've been with the bank for 30 years, I will tell you that from about the middle management point on, at every single change of job, I looked externally, because that is your responsibility to make sure that you know what your value is, that you know what options are out there. And thankfully, the organization just is so big and had so many different opportunities that there was always something that was the right thing for me at that time. And so it's translated to me being here for 30 years. But there is no shame or harm in looking at all your options. You should do that.
Great. We have hit the top of the hour almost exactly, Kim. I can't believe the hour has flown by so fast. I apologize to all of you who submitted questions that we didn't get to. There were a number in the queue. But Kim, I'm going to put it back to you for final words of wisdom as we bring this session to a close.
Well, there might be a theme here that be bold. Think about what's possible for you, and just really, really put a mirror up and look at what it is that you want. You want, not what everyone else wants from you or what you think you should have or what you're only able to. What do you really want? And just think big. I think that would be, if I reflect back now on my previous answer, that probably was one of the things that I wish I had done a little bit more of, is just thought a bit bigger, because I think we don't do that often enough.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Kim, for your very open and how you've shared so many of your own personal stories, but also what you're doing from a bank perspective and then the organizational perspective. We're in this together. Women can't do this alone. It's really important for the organizations to lay the foundation and to be supportive of all, being inclusive of all communities. So thank you again for your time. A reminder to the viewers that this has been recorded. If you want to go back and listen again, it'll be available on YouTube, and come back and join us for the 4th in our series next week. Thank you all so very much. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.